This portion of In-Fisherman is brought to you by America's Truck Stop, the new Dodge. The more you look, the more you'll know. The rules have changed. Al, Ron, and James Lindner present Finding Fish. That's always the trick, isn't it? And finding America's greatest sport fish, the smallmouth bass, is no exception. Locating these bronze-backed bombshells consistently requires a thorough understanding of the environment and the fish's seasonal needs. For instance, in Chequamegon Bay of Lake Superior, smallmouth primarily use wood and weeds, a situation unknown to the rock-related fish of Lake Oahe on the prairies of South Dakota. Even within large bodies of water such as the Great Lakes, one population of smallmouth may feed primarily on crawfish, while another population might feed on pelagic bait fish like cisco and shad. Obviously, the forage base as well as the bottom terrain of a lake dictates the location and seasonal movements of smallmouth, and understanding these factors is important to finding smallmouths as well. Smallmouth bass as a species are very adaptable and develop different habits depending on the body of water in which they live. But by studying a number of typical locations and behavioral patterns, we can develop a frame of reference that will help simplify finding smallmouth wherever they swim. On this program, the In-Fisherman staff will look at the smallmouth bass in large lakes. We'll study their seasonal movements, paying attention to how and where they live. And finally, we'll look at the mechanics of fishing individual lures and where they work best. Now, the fish are waiting, so let's get on with it.
Boy, this is some beautiful looking habitat in here.
This is prime smallmouth country, James.
You know, smallmouths in spring are extremely easy to find. In spring, once the water temperature reaches about the 50-degree mark, they move from their wintering areas to their spring spawning area. And spring smallmouths are extremely easy to find. You literally drive around and look for them.
Boy, there's a big smallmouth, James. You know, to spot early season smallmouth bass, a good pair of polarized sunglasses is critical for both spotting fish and cover. Now, what are we talking about with cover? Well, big wind protected bays, 3 to 8 foot of water, and what are we looking for? Mixed boulders, gravel, and marl bottom. In addition, newly emerging reed beds like this one and isolated shoreline cover and wood is also going to attract smallmouth bass early in the season.
If you're on a good smallmouth bass lake and you find this type of bottom content, water temperatures in the mid-50s and rising, I tell you one thing, you're going to find some of the best smallmouth bass fishing you will see throughout the entire year.
There's mine, Jim.
You got him?
Yep, unbelievable.
Should have some more fish in here. We're on a great big flat. The smallmouths are just moving in here to spawn. Water temperatures in the 60s. And, whoa, come here. Look at the size of that fish. Oh, look at that. Now we're talking. Beautiful fish. Me and Dan Sura are going to look at strategies for fishing pre-spawn smallmouth bass. Let's see if we can get that hook out of her mouth. Boy, that's a beautiful fish. There we go. Get her back in the water. There'll be some more in here. That's a big fish. As with any early season fishing, weather trends tend to dictate the movement of smallmouth bass onto the shallow spawning flats in spring. Once water temperature reaches about the 50-degree range, stable, warm weather usually pulls the fish shallow quickly, while a severe cold front can push them off just as fast. Generally, on these rock flats, there are a couple specific areas that smallmouths will relate to. Large isolated boulders are always magnets. Transitions from rock to soft bottom can be good. Docks, pencil reeds, rock piles, and last but not least is a sharp drop-off area that tends to concentrate smallmouths moving up or down.
He was on the back side here.
Yeah, there's a, look at that. Man, there are. Look at the size of these things.
This key area, Jim, this is one of those little key areas that's going to attract numbers of these big fish. There's no doubt in my mind that when you find these prime areas, they can hold an unbelievable number of fish.
That's what you're seeing here. I know there's not a lot of spots on this lake, I don't think, that are like this. Very, very few. Oh, come here. Oh, come here. Oh, boy, that's a beautiful fish right there. Whoa, look at that. Now we're talking. Beautiful smallmouth. Absolutely one of my favorite fish in my favorite time of the year to fish them, I tell you that. Gorgeous. Get her back in there. Look
James,
at that.
right off that big rock.
That's
man! A horse, James.
Big.
Right off that boulder, Jimmy.
Looks like that fish has been up here for a while.
Yeah, look at
She's a lot darker in color.
Fish are really.
Let me get. There we go.
Need a good. Oh, this is a real mule, James.
Yeah.
Look at that.
See that?
Look at that.
That's what.
Mule. One of these early spawns. Oh, come here. Behave yourself now. Behave. Yes. Oh, James.
And that's a big smallmouth.
The old power tube. One thing about smallmouth bass, they can be isolated in real key areas, and during the pre-spawn they can be very object-oriented, and a good pair of polarized sunglasses getting out and actually fishing individual boulders, stumps, and logs can really pay dividends. This big boy came right off of that big giant boulder, flipped it to the shady side. I actually saw the fish come out and eat the tube.
This area here really depicts some classic smallmouth water. As you can see out in back of us, we have a big peninsula and an island that is like a protective berm from the main lake. And back in here, we have a big extensive flat, and you have like 6 to 8 foot of water in the center of the bay, but up on the shallower flats are anywhere from like 3 to 6 foot of water with boulders spread out on it. And the fish are using really particular areas within the bay, and that's what we're sort of concentrating on, these little rock ridges and rises in here.
What James and I did earlier this morning was we went through this very same area and fished it with a horizontal presentation, specifically spinner baits. We had a minnow bait, we had a rattle bait, and a crankbait, and we did catch a couple fish. But more importantly, we saw fish that weren't taking those horizontal presentations. So we waited a couple of hours, came back in the afternoon, and that's another tip. Many times these fish become more active later in the afternoon, especially early in the season.
Oh, there we go. Ooh. Oh,
Cutting up, James.
This boy's got a little bit of an attitude, I tell you.
Absolutely, that's what I like about him. They do have an
He's sort of
attitude.
snorting, actually. Whoa, oh, there he goes.
Man.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Better you
Boy,
than me.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
Jim, that was a 5-pounder.
He was worthwhile, just that.
The proper equipment for delivering these light jigs and tubes is fairly important. This happens to be a 7-foot graphite rod with a fairly sensitive tip for casting these lighter lures. I've got 8-pound test line and a high quality spinning reel with a good drag system. You can cast these a long distance, and with the good drag system you can fight big fish and you won't break any off. They might jump and throw you off occasionally though.
There's a variety of, ooh, there's one. There's a variety of different baits that work for pre-spawn smallmouths. There we go.
Oh, another beautiful fish, James.
Yeah, depending on their activity level, will really sort of,
I got one, James. Yes.
There's some really King Kongs in here.
Oh, man,
There we go. Ooh, look at the size. You lose them? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, look at the size of this one here. These boys are big smallmouths anywhere in the world. Oh, come here. Come here, look at that guy. Oh, look at that. Aren't they giants? I mean, they are just unbelievable. I mean, these are giant smallmouth bass. In spring, the feeding attitude of smallmouth bass can swing dramatically throughout the course of a day. At times, erratic, fast-moving baits like small crankbaits, rattle baits, and spinner baits can be the key to triggering strikes. At other times, topwater can be a hot presentation technique. If the fish are sluggish, jig and plastic combinations are usually the most consistent producers. It's important to experiment. Early in the day, a slow-moving jig may be the preferred bait. By late afternoon, fast-moving baits could be the answer for lots of bites. Got him?
Right off that rock. Another.
Black.
Right off that rock and that between that 2 boulders. It is absolutely unbelievable how object-oriented these fish are. We're going along this flat and we're picking out the absolute spots that these fish are holding. We're dropping the tube right alongside the rock, and the fish are just, you can actually see the shadow come out, eat the tube, bingo, you've got a piece of cake. If I've seen it once, James.
There he is. He went back to his rock, yeah. Oh, look at that. Ooh, there he is. Oh, look at the size of that one. Just hang on. Oh, come on, boy, there's another one. This one here, look how light this one. This one here probably just came in. Some of them, you'll see them different colors. The ones that are real dark have probably been in for quite some time, and the ones that are real light probably just arrived. And you have different flushes of fish coming in. Look at that. Ooh, boy, are them big smallmouths. I'll tell you one thing, it's one of the funnest times of the year to fish smallmouths, but one thing you gotta really sort of take care of. These are a real valuable resource. This is probably one of the finest sport fish that swims.
Smallmouth bass typically spawn in water temperatures in the mid-60s. Now, post-spawn male fish will stick around the nest for a while and guard the fry, while the bigger post-spawn females will filter out to the big main lake, rock, and boulder shoals to set up their summer residence. How far these fish travel depends on the individual lake and the habitat options available to them.
You know, in small bodies of water, this movement from the spring spawning areas to the summer areas may only be a couple of blocks. In larger lakes like the one we're on here, it may be 2 to 3 miles. The real key to find these fish throughout the summer is to find expansive main lake shelves, probably shallower than about 30 foot of water. But the bigger the better. The larger those shelves are, the more fish can be housed out on those areas.
I got her. Good one, too.
That's amazing.
Nice.
Smallmouth love topwater lures, chuggers, prop baits, jump baits, or minnow baits. They'll hit them all. It's just that at times they can show a preference for one lure over another. Let's join Al Lindner and Doug Stange in the art of topwater.
You know, some of these spots that are real high percentage spots, you know, you'll see a couple big boulders or a log or some stumps or whatever the case might be that you feel or you know from experience has got probably got a fish in it. It's worth in many cases to make you know 2, 3, 4, 5 repetitive casts in there. And the beauty of a topwater bait, you know, you can fish it effectively for 2, 3, or 4 feet, keep it right in that strike zone, then you reel it in real quick and pick another target area. But repetitive casts in many, many cases will not only work on smallmouth, but it'll work on any fish with a topwater. You got it?
No, you missed it twice. Yeah, it's like they've fed well and they're just set up and they've convinced themselves that they're not going to go chase anything, but if something like a big fat frog comes right over me, okay, maybe. I'll give a little chase.
You know, one neat thing about throwing topwater baits is you don't lose your interest in fishing all day long. Seeing something visual keeps you tuned all the time, all the time.
There, I got him.
Right up on top.
Did you see how that...
Good call, Douglas.
Well, you see how that hole is in there like that? That's a classic spot, I mean.
Is it a 2-fish hole, though?
I don't think so. Funny how as soon as we get into the wind, we've got to go to that prop bait.
No question.
It's a little bit more aggressive type bait. I had that little spook on, that puppy-sized spook, when it was nice and calm and doing quite well, although the fish were a little smaller. But in order to get their attention out here, you've got to have something a little bit more rambunctious.
You know, when we first come out here, I put on a popper and a minnow bait, and Doug started throwing a prop bait, his confidence bait, and occasionally throwing a jump bait like a spook. And fishing, in many cases, in the key spots before he gets in there, with a couple of those baits, I never had a hit on it, and bingo, he'd throw in there with a prop bait and get a conversion to a strike. So it don't take too long for the fish to say, hey, I want this and I like this better than I like this. Don't try to force it down their mouth. Give them what they want, man. Each of these topwater lures has triggering qualities suited for different conditions. A chugger popped on top grabs air and brings it under the surface. The loud noise and slow movement triggers less aggressive fish. It works best in calm, clear water, but excels in darker water. Prop baits have either one or two blades with many body shapes and blade styles. A prop bait is a good choice in rough water conditions. Jump baits are big fish baits. The angler imparts a side-to-side erratic action to this cigar-shaped bait. Jump baits work great in clear, calm water conditions. Minnow baits can be worked on the surface, below the surface, or in combinations of each. A subtle, almost dead sticking retrieve lets the bait sit motionless for 10 to 20 seconds between twitches. A moderate retrieve is a combined surface twitch with a subsurface dive and frequent pauses. An aggressive retrieve uses a constant twitch snap, followed by a pause that lets the lure come to the surface and then repeat the basic maneuver again. The bigger ones, you can see it. Go! Oh, nice one, Doug.
Whoa, he missed it. Got him.
Good one. Big fish, too. Little guy. Oh, nice one, Doug.
Oh, and he threw your bait.
Way over here. There'll be a few fish up in front of you here. Oh, got him?
Yeah, I think so.
Boy, he ate that dude up, didn't he? Looked good. Looked like a better fish, Doug. Gobbled it good.
Ee-hee, right there. Coming up.
Got him.
Think that's the same
got him,
fish?
Douglas got him. Yeah.
It's a good bass.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the same fish.
That wasn't the same one you had.
No, my fish was not that big.
No, I seen your fish roll on the thing. She wasn't the same one. There's no question. One thing about smallies, when you get into them, it is not uncommon to have 2, 3, 4 fish. You know, in a pod. Did you miss yours?
Yep.
2, 3, or 4 fish in a pod. You know, there's no question that topwater fishing for smallmouths is fun, but in a lot of cases, a whole lot of cases, it can be the best presentation going.
As James stated earlier, huge summer flats. What are we looking for? Rock piles, many small islands, and boulder points. These really concentrate summer smallmouth bass. Now on a small lake, it's a piece of cake to find these spots. Why? Because there's probably only 1 or 2 in the entire lake. But let's take a big body of water. Let's talk Lake of the Woods, Lake Cumberland, or the Great Lakes. Hey, there could be miles and miles of good habitat with no fish.
You know, the key to finding smallmouth bass throughout the summer months on these huge bodies of water is to have a presentation method where you can comb a lot of water really quickly. Baits with a lot of vibration and flash, like a rattling bait, a husky jerk bait like this, something that you can comb water extremely efficiently, a spinnerbait. Smallmouth bass are extremely aggressive fish, and usually once you get close to them, they will show themselves. That's the real key to finding fish quickly during the summer months.
Do you want to catch more fish the next time you're out on the lake? That's a dumb question, right? Of course you do. And there is a way to do it. Good anglers often key in on the most aggressive fish. In other words, they fish for the biters. You ask, well, how do they do that? On any lake, river, or reservoir, there are fish that want to bite, and others that you couldn't catch with dynamite. Let's join Dan Sura and James Lindner with insight on how to target aggressive fish.
Right up in here. You know, all lures have attracting and triggering qualities built into them, and if you think about it, on one end of the spectrum you've got plastic worms, jigs, And on the other end of the spectrum, you could have baits with a lot of flash and vibration, like spinnerbaits and of course crankbaits. And today we're fishing one of my favorite search lures, rattle baits, designed to fish active fish. This happens to be a rattling rapala. And we're going to be looking for active smallmouth bass. But you know what? These lures, these rattle baits, will also work on other species of fish as well. Let's take a look at how to attract and trigger fish on rattle baits.
There he is. There's another one, Dan.
Right up on top. Big one.
Every one of these fish are beautiful size.
Careful, watch those hooks, Jim.
I'm watching these guys here. You got it. There we go. Beautiful fish. Yeah, there we go. Where's the pliers at?
Here you go, Jim. Right there.
Thank you. These guys got real beaks on them. There we go. Beautiful fish. Get her back in the water here. Come here. There we go.
That fish hit it really during a classical portion of the rattle bait retrieve, and that is when you're reeling the bait, you sort of rip it. Reel it and rip it. And what happens, that bait is going brrrr, then it hesitates and starts to fall back down, and that's when a lot of times fish will hit a rattle bait, no matter what species of fish you're fishing for.
Rattle baits are the noisemakers of the lure world. Did you ever stop to think, how does a rattle bait work, and exactly how do the fish perceive the sound? Take a look at this. Rattle baits are a large family of lipless rattling crankbaits that are effective on bass and other predators. Basically, rattle baits are flat, hollow-bodied diving lures with a long, flat head design that causes the lure to vibrate tightly and rapidly at a moderate to fast retrieve. The secret is that rattle baits have a sound chamber filled with steel, brass, or lead shot that whips against the sides of the lure, creating sound. Fact is, sound travels 5 times faster in water than air, so water is literally wired for sound. Hey, rattle baits can be heard by anglers 50 feet from the boat, and an educated guess is that fish can detect rattle baits a lot farther than that. Now, moving lures of any kind push water and send out low-frequency vibrations that fish sense through the lateral line, while the higher-pitched vibrations are heard through the inner ear. Odds are inactive fish with small strike zones won't chase this lure, but some neutral and active fish with large strike zones will detect and zero in on a rattle bait even before they see it and then aggressively chase it down. If you think about the process you go through when you're selecting a bait, open the old tackle box and you take a look, and what do you see? A lot of it possibly has to do with the visual appeal, the shape, the size, and the color of the bait, which are all very important. Nowadays, they've got soft impregnated plastic baits that even smell positive triggers to the fish. When you think about it, the underwater environment is, like we said earlier, wired for sound. It's 5 times more dense than air and carries sound very efficiently. And the one area of research that really hasn't been explored thoroughly is sound in the underwater environment. And I believe one of the breakthroughs in the next couple of years could be the proper and more efficient use of sound in catching fish.
The thing is, it's really interesting. We've never fished this body of water for smallmouth before, and we've been using these baits to cover these giant reefs that exist in this lake really quickly. And once we found these fish, we could come in and fish more of a vertical presentation, such a jig or a grub along these edges, and probably catch more fish. But the thing is how efficient this bait is just to find where there are fish. Once you get into that area, then you can slow down your presentation and fine-tune it if you need to.
The problem is, if you're fishing a slow vertical presentation to locate fish, it could take you to ice up to find them.
Whoa, dude, another ranger. Fish up high. The presentation we're using, what we're doing is covering these bars sort of like you would mow your lawn as far as the length of a cast, and we're going back and forth over the top, then off the edge, just following different contours. There we go. As I was saying, you can cover just phenomenal amounts of water with these baits, and the whole thing is you're looking for the most aggressive fish, and so you're going to key in on the high percentage spots on these bars, whether it be rocks like we're fishing here, we're fishing the high spots, the little spines, the tips of the points, but the same thing works for when you're fishing reservoirs, if you're fishing a stump flat or weed beds as well. The fish, they'll position on the high percentage spots. These fish are aggressively up looking for food. And with these baits, because of the noise they make, they can find it really easily. I mean, these fish are, you know, if they can hear the bait 50, 60 feet away, any fish that are up on the tip of this point, it doesn't take long. You take 3, 4 casts, you're gonna find the active one immediately. It's looking for you.
On any given underwater structure, there are a number of what we call high percentage spots. High percentage spots are areas that active fish often use as feeding stations. For example, on this particular underwater point, there is a number of key spots that fish use as pivot points to corral food such as crawdads and baitfish. One of these spots is the sharpest drop to deep water. The crown, or the highest point on the structure, is another great spot. Inside corners or points are always key areas to fish. A spine or any higher rise that exists along the length of the structure. The most interesting thing is that good spots are good spots. If fish are using this structure, they will often use these particular areas year after year.
Big smallmouth, Jim.
Whoa, look at that. Oh,
Careful, careful.
did you see the size of
I
this
saw
one?
the size of
This
him,
is
and
a
I'm
big
really
smallmouth.
impressed, James.
Ooh, now we're talking a real Buster Brown. Look at this guy here.
Oh my God. Play him out, James.
Look at the size of that one. Holy mackerel.
You may need some help, Jim.
Yeah,
You may need some help with this.
man, that is a big smallmouth bass, I tell you.
Oh my gosh.
Come here, baby.
Well, rattle baits will catch big fish too.
You got her hooked really good. Ooh. That's the biggest smallmouth I have caught in quite some time. Look at that. Giant smallmouth bass. I tell you, rattle baits not only produce smallmouths, largemouths, muskies, lake trout, they're just great search baits that catch fish all over. You know, a lot of bass anglers consider smallmouths to be a finesse fish, where the primary lures to catch them are downsized crankbaits, you know, spinnerbaits, little tiny grubs. Actually, dealing with smallmouth bass, particularly big ones, that isn't the case all the time.
Now, small baits will definitely catch numbers of smallmouth bass, and absolutely you're going to catch some big fish as well. But if you want to target the really jumbo smallmouth bass, try big lures. I'm talking huge minnow baits, crankbaits, and spinnerbaits. And don't ever underestimate the utilization of speed to trigger the biggest fish in the school. Remember, these are aggressive fish. And in this next segment, we're going to take a look at some location and presentation patterns for taking trophy smallmouth bass. There he is, smallmouth. Look at this. Look at Look at that. We're talking some. Whoa. You weren't kidding, James. Boy, these spinnerbaits are just deadly on triggering these giant smallmouths. Oh, man, he got off. Oh, 5 pounds if he was an ounce. Did you see that? James has been telling me about this secret technique that he's got for busting big smallmouth bass. He's always coming up with some neat little wrinkle. Look at this. Got a dog-eared sinker on this big Roland Martin Blue Fox spinnerbait. I mean, we're chugging it and we're cranking it and we're jerking the rod and we're adding a lot of attracting and triggering qualities, and we're catching giant smallmouth bass. And most people think smallmouth bass, well, you gotta finesse them. You gotta use tiny little worms. You gotta use slow retrieves. We're doing anything but that. We're rattling their cages and we're turning some fish on. Wait till you see this.
This really works best in real clear water lakes, where you have ciscos, shad, where smallmouths do some amount of suspension, where they really focus their diet is on a lot of meat, meaning minnows versus crayfish. It seems like it's the best.
James, what different types of areas is this presentation effective in?
Actually, it works over the top of weed beds, mixed combination of deep weeds and rocks, where you have shelves that dump off to deep water really quickly, where smallmouths are holding off the deep edge of the shelf, maybe 6 or 8 foot down. It goes from 2 to 10 foot of water, and the fish are holding down off that shelf. As you rip it over that shelf, you want to pause, reel the bait really quickly over the edge of the shelf, then jig it, then start reeling again. And a lot of times what happens, I think that hesitation of the bait gets the fish to start looking at it, and then when it starts to speed back up again, that's when the fish will come up and they'll just pound it.
If you're fishing this stuff on real beefed up bait casting tackle, obviously the fish aren't going to be line shy because the bait's moving so fast. What other kind of equipment do you like? These 7-foot heavier action rods?
Actually, you want a rod that you can really hurl the bait a long distance, because a lot of times it seems like smallmouths, when you're fishing a technique like this where you're pulling the bait real fast, smallmouths will get on and track the bait, and then when you're jigging it will have the tendency to trigger the fish. But you want a rod that you can take and cast a long ways. I'm using 17-pound XT, really firing it out there and really cranking it fast. Ooh, there's one. Oh,
a
there you
big
go.
smallie, James.
Yep, look at the size of that one. Boy, he just smoked it.
Ooh. Ooh.
There we go. Another great big smallmouth. You know what's really interesting is that this burning big spinner baits for smallmouths does not work that well on largemouths. Get her back in the water.
There he is, James. Way at the end of the cast. I mean, that blade hit the water. I turned the reel twice. Oh, it's another big smallmouth. Look at this. Look at that, another big smallmouth. One of the things that's real important with any special presentation is getting the right equipment, and James talked about the long rods. Whoa. One of the other real important functions of that rod, that longer rod, is to get hooks at the end of the cast. How's that? Yeah, I'll put you back.
You may ask, what is the significance of weighting the spinnerbait? Clamping a 3/8 to 1/2 ounce dog-eared sinker to the hook shaft changes how the bait runs in a number of different ways. One, you can pull the bait much faster and still retain depth, an important factor. The other thing, when the bait is jigged, the additional weight makes the bait fall backward into the face of following fish, which triggers strikes.
Well, I've caught quite a few smallmouth bass burning spinnerbaits in high light conditions. Right now, with the weather we have, with this wind and the overcast, is just perfect for burning these things. It really gets the fish up and active, it seems, for this technique. Cover a lot of water, and you don't have to, it's not a real finesse technique, you know, you can do it in big wind. You get out here in big wind and it'd be really hard to fish a real small jig or an ultra light presentation.
Oh! Almost tore the rod right out of my hand.
There you go.
Gotta be a big smallmouth. Big smallmouth. Oh, yes. Oh. Whoa. Come here, you. Whoa. Oh. Smallmouth bass. Speeding spinnerbaits. What a way to catch them. I fish smallmouth bass a lot of different ways. That was the hardest hit that I've ever had in my life. Oh.
One critically important factor to catch smallmouths anywhere is to understand how these fish move on these food shelves. For example, a large group of smallmouth bass have taken up residence on this flat, which is composed of a lot of small rock piles, extended points, islands, weed and rock transitions, surrounded by 30 feet of water. Smallmouth tend to spread out over the area in small sub-schools of 5 to 25 fish on individual spots like a rock pile or a point. Active smallmouth often will move to the highest spot on each one of these areas to feed on crayfish and minnows. Inactive fish tend to position someplace where there is a quick drop-off. In some lakes, these same fish intermittently move off these structures to feed on pelagic baitfish like ciscos and tullibees. These fish tend to be the largest fish in any system they exist in.
Historically, fishing lures and techniques go in and out of fashion faster than clothing. But some lures and techniques have withstood the test of time and have become old standbys in any angler's arsenal of lures. Let's join James and Bill Lindner with some strategies on a lure that has been forgotten by many anglers.
Ooh, there's one. Whoa, big boy. Ooh, did that one roll up on it, Willie? Ooh, look at that.
Good fish. Nice fish.
First one. Didn't take long. There we go. Look at that one. You look at the conditions right now and you'd say that it wouldn't be that prime a top water with the amount of chop that we have. But if you're throwing the right type of baits, that a lot of smallmouths like this and even largemouths will come up in relatively windy conditions.
Surprised at how close to the boat these fish will hit.
Oh, look at that. Beautiful smallmouth bass. See if we can get some more. What I usually like to do with a bait like this particular bait is a boy howdy. But you take it and you give it rips and then let it sit. Rips and let it sit. Seems to get the fish to trigger on it. If you call them up. I've seen different times when this bait, you wouldn't believe it, it's got triggering qualities that no other lure has, and at times this bait here can be a hot deal, especially during the summer, during the warm water months. Particularly effective on pretty clear water. We're fishing over the top of a reef here that's probably 3 to 6 foot deep, 8 foot deep, with a lot of scattered boulders over it. We were just fishing a big Canadian tournament up on the Minnesota-Ontario border. And during pre-fishing, our pattern to finding fish was these particular baits, these prop baits like this. And the thing is, it was really unbelievable because we had several days of a pretty hard wind. And for some reason, the fish were on a real heavy minnow diet, not crayfish on the particular lake we were fishing on, Rainy Lake. And boy, it was just unbelievable. Even in that big wind, we had 20-mile-an-hour winds, 25-mile-an-hour winds, and we were just smoking big ones doing that.
Well, most people associate good topwater fishing with flat, calm conditions, early morning or late evening. But here we are at midday, with a pretty decent chop on the water, overcast, and the fish are coming up on topwaters.
Ooh, there's one, 4 or 5 pounder. Oh. The thing is, when you're throwing a prop bait like this, yeah, you're better off with heavy line. Heavy line is critical in the fact that if you're running lighter line, it'll drag the bait down and the props will not rip the way they're supposed to. Here, I'll get them, Willie. I'll get them. Ooh, we gotta stay off the hump here. We'll get some more of them going here. Come here, baby. Oop, oop. Some ways you gotta I like to hand land them like that. When you grab them underneath the belly, they really calm down immediately. There we go. Beautiful smallmouth.
One tip for using these prop baits that some guys use that fish them a lot is to put a little silicone floatant on the first 1.5 or 2 of the line to keep it floating high on the surface. So when you pull it, the nose isn't buried down. That's also why you want to use heavier line. Skinnier line will lay down in the water and sink when you let it rest for a second.
There we go.
Prop baits are actually a very old family of lures that have been around since the late 1800s. Today they're constructed of wood and plastic with 2 general designs. One is a short, fat bait, the other is a long, thin profile that works for both largemouths and smallmouths in the right conditions. Prop baits generally work best in warm water when bass are willing to rise vertically 3 feet or more to hit a bait. You can adjust the blades of the bait to achieve differences in actions. By moving the propellers forward, you will slow the bait's glide and give more zip to the propellers. By positioning the blades back, the bait will glide more with less zip to the propellers. Most of these baits come with a solid hook hanger system. Split rings can be added to give freer hook movement and better hooking.
Oh, there he is. Finally got one to hit. I guess tuning that blade helped a little bit.
That's unbelievable. You just did that and you got a strike right away.
I'm not kidding. I was throwing behind you for 25 minutes and never had a bite. Get him up here.
I'm gonna pitch back up there. Maybe he's got some other buddies.
A little smaller than those other ones, but there he is. It's not a really big fish, but it's decent. The sun coming out a little bit. You know, these prop baits are really working on these rocks, but this isn't the only place that they work good.
As we've said, prop baits work best in the warm water months when bass are willing to rise vertically to strike a lure. They work in both dirty and clear water and even in substantial amount of wind. They're highly effective in calling fish out of isolated cover like trees, bushes, over large flats of submerged weeds, wood, or boulders. One of the keys to prop bait fishing is figuring out how long to let the bait sit still. It's important to experiment with the time between twitches and pauses. In some cases, you may want to let the bait sit still as long as 10 to 30 seconds to call a fish up.
Look at that one. Oh, there we go. Oh, did you see that one? He was sitting pretty close to that marker. It's actually, you know what? That marker's on the very end of the reef. That fish, look at, he's got a buddy along with him. Got a great big fish along with him. Oh, there he goes. Look at that. He tore off. That's really surprising.
Straighten the hook?
No, I got super sharp mustads on here.
Did he straighten one?
No. It's really surprising. That's one thing about a prop bait, which is sort of reverse of what, usually it's a really high percentage hooking bait for a topwater bait because of its narrow diameter. The fish clamp down on it, and it's usually, you got them hooked pretty solidly. That fish leaped a couple of times. Apparently he nipped on it. He didn't blow up on it that hard. Beautiful smallmouth though, but that fish actually came out of probably about 7-8 foot of water. That was the very tip of the reef. We'll see if there's any more out there. Got him. Oop, there's another one. Oh, whoa, look at that. Oh, look at that. Double header on horses. There we go. Oh, come on. Oh, another big one following it along the frenzy. look at that. Double header. Prop baits during the summer months, a key presentation technique for both largemouths and smallmouths.
The next segment deals with catching smallmouth bass in deep water, and we're going to do it jigging. Now, a lead head jig can be fished ahead of a split tail, a craw, a variety of different grubs or worms, or a tube. Very, very effective. Now, these same jigging principles work whether the fish are in 3 or 35 foot of water.
Oh, I got him, Dan. Oh, man. Boy, that feels good. That feels really good. She's coming up, she's coming up. She's a big fish. Look at the size of that baby. Woo! I knew she was a good fish. Boy, I felt some weight on her. She ate that power tail. It ain't, you can't even see it in her mouth. Oh. You called this spot right, Bob. Whoa, 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 come here. Come here, come here. Hold still. Okay. Look at that one, folks, huh? That's a nice first fish, Dan. That's a beauty. You know, folks, you can catch smallmouths like this a lot of different ways. They love topwater baits, crankbaits, rattle baits. Naturally, spinners are deadly on them. They're suckers for live baits, jigging spoons, blade baits. But day in and day out, no matter where you fish, lakes, rivers, or reservoirs, spring, summer, or fall, the best way to consistently catch smallies is with soft plastics or impregnated baits on some kind of jig heads.
The best soft plastics for smallmouth bass are about half the size generally used for largemouth bass.
Some of the better profiles or shapes are small crawfish imitations, grubs, these include split tails, curly tails, or straight tails, tube baits, shad imitators, and 4-inch worms. All should be in your arsenal of soft plastics for smallies. Lure size is an important factor to experiment with. Active smallmouth often like a big grub. Inactive smallmouth prefer baits that look more like a crappie bait than a bass bait. Like a lot of fish, smallmouth attitude can swing dramatically throughout the course of a day. Always experiment. Jig heads, there's a lot of good head designs on the market. Bullet heads, mushroom heads, or plain ball heads will all work. Make sure they have a barbed collar. It'll hold the soft plastic securely in place.
I want it right on the spine, right?
Right now?
Right now.
You know what I like best about this spot?
It's out of the
There's
wind.
no wind.
Well,
I hate wind.
you ordered a spot with no wind. I found one.
I like it already. I like it already.
But are the fish here? That's
They're always here. Hey, you want to fish these baits right, folks, and really, really fish them the way they have to be fished to be the most effective. Make sure you use a spinning rod. Not a bait casting rod, not a spin cast rod, a spinning rod. 6 to 6.5 foot. 6.5 works pretty good in a lot of conditions because you got a lot of lift with light line. Most of the time you're fishing 6 or 8 pound test line. Once in a while you go to 4. And in the other extreme you might go to 10.
Here's a few key things to keep in mind whenever you're fishing humps for smallmouth bass. Al and I are fishing on Lake of the Woods, Ontario during mid to late summer. Now at this time, the biggest smallmouth are set up on sunken humps, points, and structural elements adjacent to areas where the lake basin is 30 to 50 foot deep. The shallower basins are still holding lots of small to medium-sized fish, but the biggest smallmouth are located along these deeper areas, feeding on large schools of cisco that live in the deep water sections of the lake. Now listen to this. Lake of the Woods studies show that cisco-eating smallmouth bass grow considerably larger than those that munch on crayfish. This means that our presentation should resemble a minnow rather than a crayfish.
Oh, got him, Dan. Another another sow. Whoa. I love catching. Oh, look at it. Look at this one. Look at this one. Oh, huge. Good school. Good school, Dan. Try to get in and see if there's any more in there. Hold on that spot.
You don't have to tell me that twice.
Oh.
Is he big?
Yeah. Beauty. Look at how fat they are. They're like little footballs. Bubba, your line got in my way. You're trying to get in here. Get on my fish. Then he crosses my line. There. Look at that one. Look at how fat these fish are, folks. Look at the stomach on that smallie. Beautiful. These are my favorite fish. Sunken islands are key areas that hold schools of smallmouth from early summer throughout the fall on lakes and reservoirs all across this country. The high percentage spots to look for smallmouth on these sunken islands are the crown or the very highest spot on the island. Sharp drop-offs, points, and corners will also attract smallmouth. The other structural element to look for is a saddle or an underwater ridge that attaches to the sunken island or adjacent underwater points or sunken islands. Saddle areas are always key spots for any kind of fish. But one thing with smallmouths, when you're fishing the spot on the spot, you catch 1, 2, 3 fish right away, and you might as well leave. Don't waste a lot of time sitting there. You're on the money, they're there, and they're biters.
It's gonna come up. It's gonna come up.
How deep did that one come out?
28 feet, right on this deep lip. Yeah, 28 footer. Yeah, she is deep. Oh, yeah. Oh, folks, if you're like me, you're gonna need crankbaits, spinnerbaits, blade baits, and spoons to catch bass. But don't leave the dock without a good supply of plastic baits. Believe me, they're versatile lures. When the water temperature drops into the 50s in the late summer and early fall, it marks another time for a major locational shift for smallmouth bass. The fish will begin shifting from the summer habitat out towards deeper water in the fall. We're talking mega schools of big fish.
In Lake of the Woods, Canadian studies have proven that hundreds and even thousands of smallmouth bass winter in very confined areas. In this next segment, we're going to look at smallmouths in cold water and how to find these wintering areas. There's one. There he is. Oh,
Big horse.
yeah. Ooh. There he is. Ooh. Oh.
I'm gonna tell you, Jimmy, you got me on these artificials for about 2 more casts.
I told you. What's really interesting is that any real proficient bass angler can probably catch more largemouth bass on artificial than live bait. But I really can't say that with smallmouth bass. They're really suckers for live bait. Right now, me and my dad are gonna really look at some different strategies for fishing big smallmouth bass with live bait. There we go. Beautiful smallmouth bass. There should be some more buddies of his up there.
Well, Jimmy, you're not going to have me on this artificial controller much longer. Jim has been catching fish pretty steadily here with the live bait. I've tried jigs, I've tried spinners, I've tried crankbaits. I'm throwing a topwater now and I haven't had a lick. That tells you one thing. A, the fish are here, and B, for a number of reasons, they don't want the artificial presentation that I'm giving them, yet they are hitting that live bait. We're going to find out why.
One of the most important facets of angling is understanding the feeding nature of fish. If fish are in a positive feeding mood, you usually can find and catch more fish on artificials. You just have to get the bait close to them and some will bite. If the fish are in a neutral or a negative mood, you may have to trigger the fish into biting. How do you do that? Baits may have to be retrieved in a certain way to generate strikes. For example, crankbaits may have to be bounced off the bottom. Spinnerbaits may have to be burned extremely fast or slow rolled. Jigs may have to be snapped hard or just dragged slowly on the bottom. If the fish are in a super inactive mode, live bait may be the only answer to catch any number of fish.
Give me one of them minnows.
Right now we're fishing in late fall and these fish are really starting to move towards their wintering areas. Some different studies have been done, radio telemetry and tagging studies in Canada found that smallmouth bass in fall will actually gravitate to wintering areas, which like huge areas like this whole shelf in here, which is a whole maze of rock humps and rises, big boulder fields. All these fish will gravitate to one very small area to winter. So you got to be somewhat careful if you find these types of spots with live bait, because you could go in and really decimate a school of fish in a short period of time if you were to keep them. Got one going.
Yeah.
Got him?
Yeah, I got him. That's a small jaws, all right. I had a hit slightly before that as well. Boy, they're hitting it light. You ask me if they're big. They're all big. The hardest fighting fish in the world. Whoa. Right in the tip of the mouth there. While these fish are grabbing the baits and not our artificials, even on these live bait, they're just grabbing the backs of it. You'll notice on this minnow, it just grabbed it by the back. It's just lucky that the fish turned on it and took it up by the front hook.
There's one. Oh boy, he was running. There he is. Look at that one there. Great big one. Oh, come here. Whoops. Here we go. He's over on this side. Oh, great big boy. Boys are tough on light line. A long spinning rod really works well for delivering these live bait systems. This is a 7-foot Tour Edition rod, Zebco, and it really reacts well for fighting a big fish on light line. Oh, there's a good one. Let me see if I can get a hold of him. Oop, he's not hooked right in the tip of the snout. You can see how that fish was hitting. They've been hitting really light, and look where I got him. Right in the very tip of the nose. There's really two different main delivery systems for live bait. This is one of them. What we would possibly do is add a split shot or a additional sliding sinker on here to fish a little bit deeper water. Right now we're fishing relatively shallow, or you could possibly use a jig, and you could tip like leeches or minnows on the back of the jig, which works really well for casting and sort of walking it down the edge of bluff banks or rock piles.
I'm gonna let this one run. I missed 2 in a row here. He dropped it on me.
Just let it sit there. Usually, sometimes they'll come back.
Wait. I let it run. There, he's on it.
There you go. You got him.
Oh!
Yeah, you still got him?
Yeah, I got him. That's bigger fish. Nice.
That's a nice one.
Beautiful.
He looked like he was hooked a little bit better there.
Yeah, he grabbed the bait that time. One thing about live bait, it might not be the bait for all seasons, but I'll tell you, all seasons, it does catch some fish.
Well, that's smallmouth bass for you, and that's the program for today. We've tried to pass on a general understanding of the seasonal movement, location, and lure patterns for finding and catching smallmouths in big lakes across North America. This fish occupies a unique spot in many anglers' hearts because of their aggressive nature and exceptional fighting ability. Thanks to the stocking programs of many states' fisheries departments and anglers like you who practice sensible catch and release ethics, there are more places to catch smallmouth bass than ever before. Recently, lakes across this country have seen a dramatic population explosion of these bronze beauties, exposing even more anglers to this fabulous fish, the smallmouth bass.
No doubt in my mind that when you find these prime areas, they can hold an unbelievable number of fish.
Come on.
How deep did that one come on?
28 feet, right on this deep left.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Ooh. Careful.
Did you see the size of
I
this
saw
one?
the size of
This
him,
is
and
a
I'm
big
really
smallmouth.
impressed, James.